Hey, hey,
Hello, hello.
how are you?
I am amazing.
Awesome, awesome. Ready?
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this. So, we've decided to come live today and discuss anxiety since everyone is on an anxiety mode, including myself. I haven't been sleeping and yeah, things have been a bit funny. And we've been receiving a lot of questions about anxiety on your platforms and so on. So we thought we'd go live today and discuss anxiety, like what is anxiety, what causes anxiety, and how can we handle it on our own, and when does it become a serious matter, and all these things. So how do you want us to go with this? I do it a question by question. Well,
So let's do this a little bit freehand for now. First of all, are you getting the messages and the texts that people are sending? Then I can remove
yes,
my consciousness from there, right?
yes,
So
and I
um,
have a list of questions as well.
fantastic. Welcome to the followers. Welcome to the people interested in this. And thanks, Noor, for helping me actually get online and finally get my ass moving,
Been a
giving you
while.
the information.
I've been chasing him.
So, the topic for today is anxiety. We are going through anxious times. And when I say we're going through anxious times, I'm not talking about just because of the current corona craze, as I like to call it. It would seem that anxiety is the thing of this generation and perhaps a couple of generations past as well. So, before we get into it, a bit about my background. I'm a psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. So, I work at the public healthcare system as a psychotherapist. Um, I am a hypnotherapist by training, by choice of direction and perspective. I was certified by the National Guild of Hypnotists back in 2014. Never looked back in my hypnosis trainings. I've delved a little bit into quite a few other perspectives, neurolinguistic programming, NLP or coaching, Reiki, other healing modalities, energy healing modalities, energy psychotherapy specifically. Generally energy psychotherapy. And then finally, we came into laughter yoga. And laughter yoga has been a big hit for me, or a big success personally. It's allowed me to take my work down to out to a platform, help people on a bigger scale. I'd like to say on a mass scale, but let's just say on a bigger scale. And the laughter yoga sessions, when I share them, do get quite a good reaction.
Yep,
People
yep.
who are feeling down and are feeling better, people who are anxious and they forget their problems, at least momentarily, and people who tend to follow me to keep updated with the laughter, which is fantastic. But one of
Yep.
the downsides is it tends to also it tends to direct the light away from the fact that I'm a mental health professional, that my
Yeah, and we've
actual
discussed that
passion
a
begins
time.
in hypnotherapy.
Yeah, yeah. I was just saying that. Yeah, we discussed that a few times, which was a bit of an issue in terms of how people thought that you're just out there to make them laugh and that's it.
I mean, I'm happy to be just out there to make them laugh, especially since it's proved to be fantastically useful.
Yeah,
Um, but also, I have a set of skills that I'm also willing to share with the universe. They're not exactly the same like laughter yoga. Hypnosis is more of, or psychotherapy. It's more of a one-to-one sort of skill. There are forms where we do them in groups, and perhaps if we have any luck today, we're going to do a group hypnosis session, a small hypnosis session to help with the anxieties anybody's feeling. But before we get to that, perhaps let's do this the way you had planned it, or the way you thought it out.
okay. I just had a set of questions, and then yeah, the thought was to close up with techniques from your end, and maybe a few minutes of laughter yoga as well.
Okay, hey, I'm happy to do it however works.
Okay, so the cliche typical question, what is anxiety?
So, what is anxiety? Well, we can break that up into three levels. The first level is the existential level. Anxiety is a thinking problem, so the cognitive existential level. So, existence is just you being uncomfortable in your own skin in the moment. And of course, when in psychiatry or in psychology, when we define things as problems, we don't define them because it happened in a specific point in time, but more likely because it's something that's persistent or kind of, going for a long term. So either it is a really intense moment that happens once or twice in your life, and that could qualify as a disorder, or it's less intense and perhaps even what's the word I want to say, less than intense, but it's something that is just kind of ongoing in the background for persistently long times. So sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's a decade, and even more. Okay, so existentially speaking, the first level, it's basically being uncomfortable. Okay, there are other ways to describe it: being wound up, being tense, being nervous, right?
Okay.
And that's the existential way of explaining anxiety. Now, a lot of people won't understand what that means, so then we'll go into the thinking disorders or the cognitive perspective of explaining what anxiety is. And before I go into the cognitive perspective, you need to understand that we all have a voice inside. And if you're wondering what voice inside, it's that voice inside that asks you, what voice inside? And that voice inside is always, always, always talking to us, right? It never shuts up. Even when you're sleeping, it just keeps going, right? Now, you may be aware of it, you may not be too aware of it, just depends where you choose to put your focus, but there's a voice inside. It's a self-conversation. And on the level of cognitive explanation of what anxiety is a feeling of uncomfortableness that comes because of unmet expectations or incorrect expectations. So you have a thought pattern that produces anxiety. For example, danger, danger, danger. So it might be, for example, that you're thinking about your financial status. You're having this constant conversation with yourself. I don't have enough money to do this or do that. And, these bills are coming up and you're always on edge because of that existentially. So there's that thinking problem. It's an excess of worrying about things and the inability to focus and concentrate on things other than the thing that you're actually worrying about. Okay, so on a cognitive level, it's an overactive mind, and specifically it's an overactively worrying mind. Okay, and when we say worrying, we mean either worrying in the classic sense, oh, what's going to happen, oh, I'm worried, or in the more planning sense. So you're constantly just, like planning, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. It's like you're preparing for World War Z or whatever it is. So you're just constantly like on edge, always planning every step of the way, a bit of perfectionism. And of course, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the stuff that goes beyond that place where people say that's a good habit, that's a great personality or whatever. No, it's just that tad over the limit that just makes it overbearing. So cognitively speaking, it's excess worry. Existentially speaking, it's nervousness, it is uncomfortableness. So when we're talking about cognitions as well, or thinking, we're talking about the causes of anxiety. The causes of anxiety being unhelpful belief systems. Right? So these could be known as cognitive distortions or biases. There's many different ways to explain or to go around defining what is happening exactly, because it's usually a complex soup of things. But basically, it's all pretty much the same thing. You have some sort of belief system. You think that the world works in some way, or you define the world in some way, or you think it works in some way that just isn't helping. It produces a lot of anxiety for you, meaning when you think your 1 + 1 always equals danger, or more likely than not equals danger. So perhaps you have a belief that the world is perhaps you have a belief that you are ugly, for example, and you know you're constantly worrying about how you're going to make yourself presentable. Now, worrying about being presentable in a social setting is a perfectly fine thing to worry about. I mean, it makes sense on a social level. But if it comes from the place of you think you're ugly, you think you're unacceptable, and that has its own reasons it could have, um, you're more likely to
Can we
be.
take a more intense example of like that's related to the current situation where people are worried about their jobs, kids being at home, all of like something that's more relatable to whatever we're going through right now?
So
Because, for example, a lot of people are not able to sleep. A lot of people are just lost their jobs, have salary deductions. All of this is causing people to be just on the edge. So everyone is claiming to be anxious. So maybe we can take that as an example.
So yeah, so of course the external environmental factors that might trigger anxiety are separate from the internal belief
Okay.
systems that would
Okay.
make
Okay.
you more prone to be anxious, right? So you have environmental things that could cause anxiety. Anxiety is a natural reaction to changes in the environment. But then there's that inner portion of you, which is correctable, which can be used to mitigate that anxiety. So let's take the current situation. Coronavirus, all the news, all the media, everybody's dying. If you so much as breathe or even look at somebody, you're going to give them coronavirus. And even though you're going to be okay, your grandmother, your children, and everybody you love will die because of your looking at them and not being safe and not wearing a mask or going out, whatever. Okay? So you have the media, you have the event. Corona is an event, obviously. COVID, SARS-CoV-2 is an event that has happened. It is this new disease that has come up and people have lost their lives. Also, the media has been hyping it up. Also, governments have gone on lockdown. Also, people are throwing up WhatsApp messages. Everybody and their brother knows somebody who died because of something that happened, okay? Also, because of the lockdown, people have lost their jobs. Businesses have closed down. Some people have had pay cuts. You know, they're much better off than people who have lost their jobs, but they're also worried. Schools have closed down. People are facing more time with the people all the time inside four walls, barely having the ability to escape into, work or escape into a walk in the park or whatever. You know, there's that message out there, we're all in this together, and a lot of celebrities will come out and they'll say we're all in this together, and you know, it's a nice sentiment, but it's not exactly true. We're not all in this together. I'm a specifically privileged person. My situation is not the same as somebody who was working day to day for their bread, who lives in an 8-person apartment, who's far away from their family, who hasn't the education or the support that I have, for example. Yep. You know, so it's a nice sentiment, but it isn't exactly true. I mean, we're all in the same storm. We're not all in the same boat, so to speak. I digress. Sure. So, you know, there are outside stressors and they have triggered an internal unrest and a discomfort. And the discomfort usually looks like this. So as you said, money is tight. How am I supposed to be paying for this or that? How am I going to feed myself? How am I going to feed my family? If I lose my job, I'm going to lose my visa. If I lose my visa, I'll be sent back home. For those of you who are expatriates in countries working, if I go back home, I won't be able to support my family over there. I can't get a job either. There's a whole reason why I came to this country, etc., etc. See, that chain of thoughts that kind of chain themselves on. It's not the fact that they are true or false, right? So this is regardless of whether they are true or false, although most likely they are blown out of proportion in order to create that anxiety. It's the fact that you only have that thought process and you can only focus on that thought process and nothing else. So even the notion, somebody coming to you and going, you know, perhaps it won't work out that way. Perhaps there's aid that's coming here or there. Perhaps there's a light at the end of the tunnel. That actually creates more anxiety. Now you're angry and you're pissed off because somebody is invalidating your chain of thought. Right? So something that you're pretty much convinced is true. right? So the idea that the environmental factors exist that trigger anxiety, anxiety is different between different people because they have different belief systems within them. Now, my privileges have built up my belief systems. I believe I'm safe. I believe whatever happens, I'm safe. Well, in most cases, I am safe, financially speaking, in this economy, right? And what's happening. That's not the same for everybody else. And different people will have different belief systems about what's available to them, about when this pandemic will end, when the country will open up, or when the economy will flourish again. And different people have different expectations of what will happen when the country opens up. What will happen to the economy? Will it be hyperinflation, or will it be hyperdeflation, or how will it work? Okay. So really, it's very individual, but the idea is you have a chain of thoughts, and that thought is your own self-talk with yourself. And there's two ways to do this. Either you get focused on that self-talk, and that continues to give you unrest, and you're always imagining horrible situations happening, or the second way of doing this, the second behavioral manifestation of this kind of anxiety, is you tend to block out that part, suppress that part, stick it on a side so it's going on in the background. You're not very aware of it. And what you do behaviorally then, and this is the third level of speaking about things. So we did the existential, we did the cognitive, and now we're doing the behavioral. So in the behavioral, you're going to be easily distractible, finding any reason to be distracted, focusing on your phone, focusing on a movie or a series, or binge watching, reading newspapers nonstop. And some habits are better than others, but the idea is the manifestation is you're just kind of looking for ways to distract yourself. And you could actually be quite out of it in those ways to distract yourself. Right, so we have three levels of behavior. We have the environmental triggers that could or could not be there. It doesn't matter really, right? And then you have the internal set of beliefs. Your internal set of beliefs are dependent on your upbringing and your personal history. But based on that internal set of beliefs, you have three levels. You have the existential level, where we say you're uncomfortable, you're nervous, etc. You have the cognitive level, where we say you're worrying, you're overthinking, you're lacking focus, you're having brain fog, whatever the behavioral manifestation may be. And then you have the behavioral level, and that kind of goes into social relationships and how you're behaving. So you could either be totally kind of focused on your chain of thought, overtly on it, going for perfectionism, or going perhaps for planning everything, or just lost in your own anxieties, kind of going into a panic attack or an anxiety attack, be as it may. Or you would be kind of always constantly looking for ways to distract yourself, and that would also kind of affect the things you actually have to do. Right? So it could be social isolation. So isolating yourself is one of the behaviors as well. Right? So once you get on a behavioral level, you always have things forking one way or another. On an existential level, it's technically just one size fits all. On a thinking level, there's many different molds that you can take. They're based on your own kind of upbringing and development, on your personality, but also it's more one mold fits all. It's called worrying, overthinking, etc. The subjects may change, but the behavior is the same. When it comes behaviorally, though, you have kind of either or sorts of behaviors. So on the one hand, you can get hyper-focused, perfectionist, kind of trying to control your environment to the extreme, which can put stresses on your relationships, which can be stressful just in general, because inevitably you realize I don't have control over my environment, not that kind of control, nothing that's satisfying. Or you can go the other way around, totally distracted, totally disconnected, and shut off from the world, shut off from the environment, less social interaction, less engagement, and of course the whole spectrum of things in between. Right?
Okay. My other question was going to be, so what's the difference between anxiety and panic attacks, and are they the same? Are they related? Are they intertwined, or not the same?
So anxiety is the general manifestation, and then panic attacks are a specific subcategory. It has it's a specific subcategory. CADI, we will get back to that question ASAP. Let me just finish this little part. Maybe I'll take a thing. Sorry, I did see your question earlier. I was just on a roll. So where was I? Panic attacks versus anxiety. Anxiety is the big general category, and panic attacks is a subcategory. And a panic attack really happens in a moment. Of course, it can be repeating. It can happen over several moments. And what it is it's an intense bout of anxiety, usually just hits like a sudden. It's just triggered, and there's a lot of physical manifestations in a panic attack. Right? In a panic attack, you're likely to feel, physical sensations like the rushing of the heartbeat, increasing heartbeat, dryness of the throat, sweating, heat sensations, cold palms, shivering, your stomach may hurt. Like you'll have this whole manifestation of physical symptoms that you get with anxiety. Right.
Okay.
Whereas anxiety in general is not necessarily like that intense. It can be much like it could be any one of these different things happening at any time. Okay. Numbness is one of those as well.
What is it? Sorry.
Numbness. Ahmed here has said numbness. Yep. And you might also have like intense thinking bouts. So some people will go, I need to go to the hospital right now. Other people, I'm dying. There's a sensation. It's just, I'm dying. I don't mean to laugh about it. Yeah, I mean, it's only funny after the fact sometimes, even with people who are actually facing it. But while you're there, it's like you're convinced you're dying for one reason or another. Or sometimes you feel like you're losing your mind, and that's another one other than dying. The idea is loss of control.
Okay, my other question is, how do I know it is actually anxiety and not just me being a bit dramatic or just a bit out of, it's not just a moment, but it is actually anxiety.
So that is really an interesting question. There is no answer to it. You get to define what is what. And as a psychotherapist, I'm going to tell you that regardless of whether it's quote unquote drama or quote unquote real anxiety, the idea is it acceptable to you? Is it something that you're comfortable with, or are you ready to change it? Would you like to change it? And that is the way I view the world as a hypnotist. It's not, is it a problem or not? I don't define what problems are for people. I encourage them to just decide. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about being able to change, being able to have agency, be aware, define that this is a problem or not, and then what do I do to change it? And those steps are different. Is there a difference between drama and anxiety? Not really. Sometimes, the drama is anxiety. It's actually, someone else will call it drama, but, in the moment it's anxiety, and dramatic people tend to be quite anxious, whatever dramatic people, means.
Yep.
Okay.
And when do you reach a point where you go like, no, okay, I have to see a professional person or a doctor or whatever for my anxiety? Like, when does it get out of proportion and it has to be managed or guided by a professional person?
So once again, this is a question that I find interesting to answer. There's a saying out there, or there's a sentiment out there. It's pushed by the World Health Organization, basically, and they're telling you by 2020, the 3 in 4 people will have had depression or anxiety or a mental illness, etc., etc. And so that is why we need mental health services. And my view of mental health services is that it's not a needs-based service. It's a want-based service. So nobody really needs a mental health intervention. You may benefit from a mental health intervention if you want it, right? So you may benefit from speaking to a professional or several professionals, and you may find your way into a developed self, one that is more aware, more accepting, and can handle better the issues that used to be troublesome to you in specific ways. And that's whether that trouble is anxiety or depression or panic attacks or hallucinations, schizophrenia, whatever it may be, weight loss, overweight, whatever that issue may be. But in the world of mental health, I don't think it's a needs-based kind of service. And that is tied into the actual work we do. We talk to people. We can't force things on them. So it's not a needs-based event. However, there are certain signs where other people who usually care for this person or the law will intervene because that person would have, because of the underlying issue, whether it be anxiety or whatever, would have broken the norm. So panic attacks is one of the classic ones, and usually when people start having panic attacks, they themselves will go to seek help, although not always. That depends on your belief systems and culture. And the availability of services, of course. So panic attacks is one of those. It's just kind of one of those things that happens that is hard to ignore. You tend to go seek help once you've had one. Another one is depersonalization or derealization. And this is a specific phenomenon where after a while of anxiety or because of an intense bout of anxiety, the person kind of disconnects. There's a change in consciousness. And usually this is much more apparent to other people than to. So they go into this blank face, this ghost face. There is a difference in who that person is. And it is quite pronounced. Like if somebody just knows you even a little bit, even if you're just working together. And I'm sure you've been in an office and somebody comes in and you look at them and you're like, what's wrong with you? Is everything okay? Like you look like you've been hit by a truck or you saw a ghost or whatever. So it's depersonalization or derealization. This can happen for a couple of hours.
Sorry. I was saying, or as Ahmed said, like becoming numb and not having, like, as you said, desensitized and not feeling what's happening outside.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you'll catch your own feelings and you'll kind of go to them. But that really depends on the culture of the society you're in. Now, in 2020, we don't really have that problem anymore around the world of stigma against mental health. It exists, don't get me wrong. There is stigma against mental health and mental health services. But for most of the people today with access to movies and the telephone and whatever, there's an awareness of mental health issues. You might deny the fact that you are having problems, but it's not the same as stigma towards mental health. So everybody's sort of aware, and you're likely to be able to catch yourself having anxiety or depression or whatever. Yeah. Other people will realize, once again, so you have the depersonalization, derealization issue. So you just change, and that's more likely to be noticed by other people. That also involves that numbness, that emotional numbness. But once again, this is other people who are likely to pay attention to this. Panic attacks, anxiety attacks, those you're likely to feel and you're likely to have. Not always, by the way, but also other people will notice this. People who love you, people who are around you will just kind of call you out on it eventually. And then finally, you have the more subtle change in personality, which is getting away from society. So breaking off from your normal social activities, breaking off from your family. Somebody is eventually just going to notice, hey, where have you been the past month, 2 months, 3 months? What happened? I talked to you, you're not responding, etc., etc. So those are the three situations where usually people will step in for you, will come in and say, hey man, or hey, you need help, etc. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a culture thing. If you're wondering about it, you may benefit.
For example, the idea of biting your nails, like sometimes people, when they become anxious, they start biting their nails. They oversweat, they start plucking their eyebrows, shaking their knees. Like that's what I meant more about. When does a person physically realize that, okay, no, I need to go seek help or support for my situation?
So some of the physical manifestations that you can get before talking about behavioral manifestations, are holding tension in your body. And you might get tense shoulders, you might have digestive issues, you might have trouble sleeping, whether sleeping too much or sleeping too little, or just having disturbed sleep. You might have random pains or numbnesses, physical ones in your body, feelings of tingling. You might have the different sensations that are related to an anxiety attack or a panic attack. For the lady asking what's the difference, there's hardly any difference between a panic attack and an anxiety attack. A difference in degree, I assume, is the correct answer, but you know, the manifestations are pretty much the same. Panic attack would be more extreme. So you have the physical sensations where joint pains, muscle spasms, numbing and tingling sensations, excess sweating, under sweating, sleep disturbances, appetite disturbances, bladder disturbances. So you might have a nervous bladder as well, over peeing. So there's a whole bunch of things that can happen to you physically because of nervousness, because of anxiety, you know, whether it's underlying anxiety or pronounced anxiety. And those can be, or brain fog, the inability to focus and pay attention, the inability to concentrate, and of course, low stress tolerance. So, you know, anything that happens, you're very easily triggered. You find yourself in tears or pissed off or trying to break something or trying to run away to calm down, you know, and all of these would be quote unquote new. Now, the usual manifestation of anxiety is that it builds up over several months and years even, but sometimes it is more sudden, sometimes you can catch it. Usually, though, somebody else is likely to catch it for you. Right. So those are the physical manifestations as best as I can remember, at least. There's a whole bunch of them.
Okay. Let's get proactive and let's talk about how does one handle an anxiety attack or anxiety period or whatever it is. How do we tackle it? Especially, for example, in my case, I can't sleep before 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 a.m. sometimes since the beginning of February, being unproductive. Every day I do I put a list of to-do lists and then I end up doing none of them, and it's been building up. 3 months passed and I didn't do anything. It's pretty much productive. I did, but my brain is telling me that I didn't do anything. And I get distracted a lot, and I start something and then 10 minutes later I'm
10 minutes later, you get stuck on my screen.
the connection was, I don't know, just disappeared for a bit. So yeah, so I was saying, in terms of yeah.
So maybe before we tackle the different ways, I'll give Kadi a bit of a rest, since she did ask quite early on, does hypnosis help unveil the reasons behind your anxiety, your problems, your behavioral manifestations, whatever that may be? The simple answer is yes. You can use hypnosis as a technique to uncover the underlying causes. And when we talk about underlying causes, we're talking about memory experiences, stored experiences, belief systems, and emotions. We can use hypnosis as a technique to make it apparent to you what those things are. However, that is definitely not a necessary process in the process of getting better. And that just depends. Practitioner to practitioner will do it differently. In some cases, it is necessary to uncover things, work with them. Sometimes it's necessary to bring awareness. Other times it's necessary to bring awareness, work with them, and then remove awareness one more time from the issues. But that's the world of hypnosis and what to do in hypnosis. So usually it is just enough to note what the behavioral manifestation of your problem is in order to be able to work it out. And when it comes to the reasons for why X, Y, and Z, speculation is just as good as real evidence, right? And what that means is your best guess is usually good enough, and working on that and fixing it kind of helps fix the problem regardless. And that's related to the fact that the mind is kind of arranged a lot like a house of cards or dominoes, and toppling over one domino is likely to create a chain effect. So, and the mind is a pattern matching mechanism as well. So if you get something close enough in meaning to the actual event or to the real, quote unquote, reason, then you're likely to just fix the actual issue. And that's based on the fact that the mind kind of understands things by story, right? So storytelling is a specialty of the mind, really. Right. That's why we connect with other people's stories, we connect with movies, we connect with music and song, we connect with dance, we connect with, whatever it is. Somebody else's story can get things going. Okay. So for Ahmed, thank you for this. However, I do prefer to not be called doctor for reasons. First of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm not medically trained. Well, not officially medically trained, and I do not hold a PhD. Yeah, I know, I just work in a hospital. But that being said, I do not like being called Mr. either. Noor, however, is an old and dear friend, and I just prefer to be called Nasser, just by my first name, and that works for me. Okay. So hypnosis can help reveal your real issue, definitely, Kadi, but also just to note that is not a necessary part of the process of healing. So back to the question, I think I have talked myself out of the original question. Quick recap, what was I supposed to be answering?
How do we manage? How do we manage anxiety when we're on our own, and how do we work ourselves around it and deal with it?
Okay, so how do you manage anxiety? Once again, we break it down to the 3 levels of anxiety, or the 3 definitional levels of anxiety. On a existential level, it's nervousness, it's worry, and it's the physical symptoms that you get with anxiety. For the existential symptoms of anxiety, you have a couple of techniques. So one of them is breathing. Well, before we talk about specific techniques in time to use, let's just talk about diet. Okay, diet and lifestyle. There's a couple of things that if you're doing, you're going to be putting your system out of balance altogether. And having a balanced system means that you're going to have a more stable system, meaning you'll have more anxiety tolerance. And that means diet and lifestyle. And when we talk about diet and lifestyle, we have a couple of general dietary guidelines that will work for you regardless of what your problem is or isn't. Okay, so here it is. Minimize the amount of animal products that you eat. Animal products are meat, chicken, beef, lamb, and fish. So anything that flies, walks on the earth, or swims in the sea. Their eggs and their excretions, so milk, yogurt, and cheese. And to minimize them means to minimize them to a maximum of 3 servings per week. And there's many reasons for this, partly because of the way they're grown and the hormonal additives and how they can mess up with your hormonal system, partly because they're inflammatory foods and mucus producing foods. So basically, the idea is too much will cause chemical imbalances or hormonal imbalances in your body. It seems up to 3 servings per week is a safe amount per se, right? So first, animal products and byproducts, minimize them to 3 servings per week. The second dietary guideline is to minimize your saturated fat intakes, and that means your fried foods. So anything that is fried or highly processed is probably going to mess with your system as well. So that's your cakes and your donuts and your really, really easy sugar that you're going to get from anywhere, and anything that has been cooked 12 times before it is put on your plate. Okay, the fried oils contribute to leaky gut syndrome and a whole bunch of things in the gut dysbiosis, basically, and once again, just unbalance your hormonal system as a whole. Okay, makes you much more likely to be prone to anxious attacks and whatnot. So those are your, and then the final thing is to increase your fiber intake. And this could be the one thing that is a game changer for most people. Most people in this century eat almost no fiber in their day. And this was certainly true of me until a couple of months ago. And fiber can come from many different sources, but it's basically fruits and vegetables, right? And green leafy vegetables specifically. And when we're talking about fiber, we're talking about the basic nutrients for your microbiome, specifically your gut microbiome. And when you feed your gut microbiome with sufficient fiber, it goes on to create your omega-3s, which kind of balances out all the omega-6s from your fast food eating, etc., and fried food eating. Anyways, the idea is easy. 3 simple dietary guidelines. Minimize your animal intake, so animals and animal byproducts, so that's the meat of anything that walks on land, swims in the sea, or flies in the air. And their eggs and their secretions, milk, yogurt, and cheese. Minimize that to 3 servings per week at a maximum. Stay away from your fried foods and processed foods, and increase your fiber intake, which is fresh green leafy vegetables, as much as possible. And those are the 3 basic dietary guidelines. If you stick to those as best you can, you're likely to be very hormonally balanced. You're actually likely to increase your health status in general, and that's because some of anxiety does have physical components to it. You can actually poison yourself into anxiety with a couple of heavy metals. Anyways, I digress. So diet and lifestyle first, right?
We'll have a different session on, yeah, we'll have a different talk about that.
Then what you can do in the middle of an anxiety attack, right? Whether, once you've noticed that you have been anxious, we do need protein, Ahmed, and protein is plentifully available in plant. So yes, we do need protein, and the myth is that protein only comes from animals. So the question to help you digest that is, where do you think that animal gets its protein from? Okay, so that being said, I'll leave the diet and lifestyle to the side. So that was your food, sorry, that was diet. We didn't speak about lifestyle. For lifestyle, you're going to want to also sleep well, so have a nice little sleeping schedule, and exercise often. Exercise often really does mean exercise, but usually it actually just means move. Get up off your ass, just like your little watch will tell you, or your iPhone will tell you. Every hour, get up and move for a minute, at least. Okay, that seems to be sufficient to keep your body moving and to have all these hormones repumping in your system. Okay, so that's your diet and lifestyle, and maybe the last one will be increase your water intake, because there's quite a few people who don't drink enough water. I'm a camel. I just have to keep reminding myself day after day, week after week, right? So 2 to 3 liters per day at least. Diet and lifestyle off. Let's talk about when you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, what you can do. So once you notice that you're anxious, one of the most powerful things you can do is breathing exercises, right? And this breathing exercise will also help you go to sleep. It's actually very calming. Okay, this is known as 4-7-8 breathing. So the numbers stand for the numbers of seconds. 4 seconds for an inhale, 7 seconds holding, and 8 seconds for an exhale. And this this has been proposed to put people to sleep within 2 minutes. Right? Fascinatingly powerful. One trick to add to it is to have your tongue touching the roof of your mouth. This is a yogic principle. It's an energy thing. I don't quite understand it. It's harmless. Do it as well. It helps, whatever it is. Okay? So 4-7-8 breathing. As you inhale to the count of 4. Then you hold for a count of 7. And then you exhale to a count of 8. Now, if you don't mind, let us just do, let's say, 3 breaths like that, you and I right now. Yeah?
Yep,
As a
sure.
demonstration. And if you're there, just
Okay.
kind of breathe with us, and you'll notice that it's one of the ways to very quickly relax. All right. So first, take a note of how you're feeling now. We're going to do 3 breaths, and perhaps take a note of how you're feeling later. All right. So 1, 2, 3. Let's start. Inhale to the count of 4. Hold to the count of 7. And exhale to the count of 8. Fantastic. Inhale, count of 4. Exhale, count of 7.
Hold.
I mixed that up. All right, one more. Okay, let's start that one more time. Okay, so inhale,
Okay.
count of 4, hold, count of 7, exhale, count of 8. We'll do 3. All right, so I'll try to just kind of do it without the fingers. It's a little too confusing. All right, so inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, exhale. Okay? So this type of breathing engages your diaphragm. The diaphragm is connected to the vagus nerve or the polyvagus nerve system. It's a very quick way to relax at the time. Okay, so whenever you need it, you can just engage 2 minutes of breathing like this. Did you feel a relaxation effect by any chance? You don't have to make this up by any means either.
Yeah, so there was a my face relaxed.
Okay, another very quick technique to relax when you need it is humming meditation. I do this quite frequently in my laughter yoga sessions. Humming meditations are really easy. So you take a deep breath in, on your exhale you hum, and what you want to do is you want to close your eyes and you want to relax your face and kind of let the vibrations relax your face for you. The trick is actually you're relaxing your face. Relaxing your face is the quickest way to activate your vagus nerve system. So resting bitch face, boom, relaxes the rest of your body. Okay, but also when you add the humming to it, you get your polyvagus nerve system engaged as well, which kind of calms your nerves more. Now, once again, if you do this for 2 minutes, it works. I happen to think 3 breaths is more than enough for me. Okay, so we're going to do this again as a demonstration. Okay, so you take a deep breath in as deep as you can. You close your eyes. If you want to, you even close your ears, kind of focus on that vibrations and the humming sound. And you just hum for as long as possible while you relax your face. And you'll notice that you calm down quite quickly. So deep breath in. We'll do that 2 more times. Hum. Really focus on relaxing your face. I find it hard. My whole body starts to stoop. Practice makes perfect, obviously, but as you're doing it, deep breath in.
One of my favorite techniques, actually. Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite techniques. It's very calming. It's not just for the face, the whole like my shoulders starts to relax, therefore everything else relaxes, especially here at like the heart area and where stress is stored and all of that. I immediately see the difference.
Okay.
feeling.
Fantastic little patch-up devices, fantastic things. Doesn't take too long. You can use either of them right away. When you are relaxing, the trick is to really relax your jaw and relax the rest of your face. But once you've mastered this, relaxing your jaw, it's fantastic. It's just like all the tension leaves your body, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the breathing technique, we have the humming technique, and those are two very quick ways to deal with something. Now, once you've actually identified the behavioral manifestation, once you've identified the thought process or the thing that's actually bothering you, right? So maybe I'm anxious, or maybe I'm worried about money, or maybe my shoulders are tense, or maybe I can't sleep. Then we can move on to more complex techniques, right? To deal with your problems, like EFT, for example. I've been preaching, teaching, and doing EFT for 7 years now. And it's been an extremely tremendously powerful tool to help people with physical pains, emotional pains, traumas, and a whole bunch of things. Now, to me, EFT is hypnosis, but I'm not going to spend too much time explaining it. Let's just do a demonstration of what it may look
We'll have
like.
another session on EFT and what is it and how do we we'll have a whole set on EFT on its own.
So to answer the question of what do I do when I'm anxious, the idea is first note how you know that you're anxious. So maybe I can't sleep, right? And then EFT becomes a very easy technique. You start with the setup. The setup constitutes on tapping on this outer fleshy part of your arm, of your hand. It's called the karate chop point. It's where you would technically use to do a karate chop. Hiya! You can use either side, doesn't matter. And you want to start tapping on that. And you tap and then you repeat a setup sentence. So the sentence looks like this: even though whatever my problem is, I completely love and accept myself. And you say that 3 times. So we're going to say, for example, for now, I'm feeling anxious. Okay? We're going to tap, even though I'm feeling anxious, I completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling anxious, I completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling anxious, I completely love and accept myself, right? So that's 3 times. And then you're going to start tapping a sequence of points on your body, and you're going to do 3 rounds of that. As you're tapping on these points, you'll just use a reminder phrase. I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. So you tap on the top of your head, I'm anxious.
I'm anxious.
Between your eyes, I'm anxious. Side of the eye, I'm anxious. Under the eye, I'm anxious. Over the lip, I'm anxious. Under the lip, I'm anxious. On the clavicle, I'm anxious. And under the arm, I'm anxious. Right? So 2 more rounds of that. Top of the head, I'm anxious.
I'm anxious.
Between the eyes, I'm anxious. Side of the eye, I'm anxious. Under the eye, I'm anxious. Under the nose, I'm anxious. On the chin, I'm anxious.
The anxiety
on the
is
clavicle, I'm anxious. And under the arm, I'm anxious. Over the head, I'm anxious.
I'm anxious.
Between the eyes, I'm anxious. 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 Okay, and then to end, you just tap on the back of your hand here, okay? And then you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you hum, and then you count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you take a deep breath in, and you let it go. Okay? That's a version of emotional freedom techniques. Many versions exist out there. My favorite version is known as Faster EFT. You can search these on YouTube. They're not hard to find. You can go on Google. You can find thousands of hours of people working on all sorts of problems and thousands of hours of lectures on what it is, how it works, and why it works. Suffice it to say, this is EFT, or one of the forms of EFT. There are slight variations. Different people will do it a little bit differently. You start 3 times with your setup, even though X, I completely love and accept myself. X is I'm anxious, my head hurts, my butt hurts, I hate myself, whatever your problem statements is actually, right? I don't like my hair. Even though I don't love myself, I completely love and accept myself. So even though X, I completely love and accept myself. And then you go through the circuit. The circuit starts top of the head, between the eyes, side of the eye, under the nose, on the chin, on the clavicle, under the arm 3 times. And then you close with the back of the arm, just the back of the hand right there, the triple burner point. Counting, humming, counting, deep breath in, let it go. Right? It's one way to do it. You can find other ways to do it. This is a quick way to kind of interrupt the cognitive sequence in your mind of what it is that's bothering you. So remember, for the physical part, for the existential part, we did the breathing, we did the humming. Here we're bringing also, obviously there's a deep breath and there's a whole physical thing that we're doing. So it's not purely cognitive, but here we're starting to hit the cognitive areas as well. Okay, so as you remember, anxiety we can describe or we can define through 3 different lenses. The existential, which includes the physical, the cognitive, which is the thinking processes and belief processes, and the behavioral, social, relational. Okay? Now, speaking of which, the final techniques or one other technique to fight anxiety is actually journaling. Okay, journaling. The only problem with journaling is most people don't do it. It's just a sad fact of life. And, you know, in fact, for most of these techniques, people just don't do it. They'd rather go to somebody who
Is
do
there a
it for
specific
them.
format for journaling, or you just write and that's it?
When it comes to anxiety, what you want to do is you want to delve into the reason why you are anxious. So put out your if-then statement, the reason why you're anxious. If this happens, then that happens, or I am anxious because. And you list those reasons. And the idea is you want to fight those cognitive distortions. You want to, on purpose, change your perspective. So it requires a bit of volition, it requires a bit of trust in the process, and it's a rinse, lather, repeat thing. And what you want to do is make your list of the reasons why I'm anxious, and then for every reason that creates anxiety for you, you want to respond to it with at least 4 responses. Okay, so the 4 responses can be direct opposites of this. So I'm losing my money, so I will die. It could be a response. I'm losing my money, but I'll be okay. We only have 2 minutes left to this. You know, so respond to every anxiety-provoking thought with 4 counter thoughts. The more positive, the better. Okay. And then finally, you want to use your relationships to beat your anxiety. And human beings are social animals. That's why therapy works. By the way, therapy works more because of the relationship with
True.
the therapist and the techniques that they use. But, you know, find somebody to distract yourself with. Find somebody where you can have a positive interaction while you're doing the anxiety. Find somebody you can trust with that. Now, this is a tricky business. You don't want to find somebody who will empower your anxieties. You don't want to find somebody who will tell you, you know, everything, you're okay as it is and everything is fine. There's a level of that, you know, where they can gain your trust. So you're okay as you are, but they need to be somebody who will push you to get better. Right? You don't want somebody who's just going down that spiral with you and just getting worse along with you. So find a friend, go out, take your mind off it, clean your room, use the relational thing. So grab a loved one and ask them to help you clean your room. It's a fantastic behavioral thing that can actually
Reach out to Nasser.
Or reach out to me. Yeah.
Yes, like you mentioned everything. You can always
shameless advertisements.
He's always ready to help in whatever questions you have. He's always there, and you can always book sessions with him, and he's awesome.
I am, and I do my best.
Humbleness, it's good.
Yeah, humbleness has its place in the world. We're done.